Hey guys, it's Kevin again, finally here to review the latest new limited series from HBO, of course being Mare of Easttown. What Mare of Easttown is essentially about is basically we center on the character of Mare Shin. She is someone who has been a detective for a while now. She's someone that has been, very well respected within this town of Philadelphia, but she's recently been through a lot in her life. She's gone through some personal tragedies of her own, and that's caused her to not be as on top of things. There's a lot of cases that she has left unresolved, and her reputation is not really what it used to be. So when a new case forms within this character of Aaron McMenamin, Mare makes sure that this will be the case to really turn things around, to really try to get her back on the right track, and really do whatever she can to solve this case, once and for all, and hopefully, be able and hopefully try to redeem her reputation while also trying to grapple with a lot of other personal tragedies and a lot of unresolved relationships going on within her personal life. So Mare of Easttown overall, I was very excited for this show. Not just because of the fact that, it is on HBO, but also just looking at the cast and things like that. I mean, this seemed like one of those shows that could really be something special if handled well, but I won't lie to you guys in saying that as much as I do love HBO, they have not been delivering in the way I've wanted them to lately. It's not that they haven't had shows that are really good. I've heard great things about Succession, which I still do need to watch. Obviously, they have things like Barry and things like that, but I won't lie, this past year, they have not really delivered shows to the quality that I've expected them to. A lot of their shows, either they are really good and they don't get enough traction and people just don't really talk much about them, or they have a show that starts off really strong and then they kind of struggle how to really wrap it up, a la, say, Lovecraft Country, for example, or The Undoing, which started off kind of strong and then just completely crashed and burned as it got to the end. So I was really hoping that Mare of Easttown could finally be the show that gets HBO back on their feet, that really shows us what they're capable of really producing, the type of content that they're able to, really showcase just how great their network is in terms of storytelling. And so I did check it out, and this show absolutely blew me away. Honestly, Mare of Easttown was even more than I could have expected it to be. This not only is one of the most riveting and engrossing shows that I've watched in a very long time, but it also is a very emotional and very profound character study that is way more than I think anyone is really expecting it to be. And for me, I mean, it quickly turned into the best show I have seen, I think, all year. But we are just getting into right now, starting off with the cast. And I mean, when you talk about the show, that's immediately one of the biggest draws coming into it. I mean, this has to be one of the most star-studded ensembles in any limited series that I can think of in quite a bit. There are so many talented actors throughout the show, but it has to be said, I mean, this show would be absolutely nothing without the truly masterful work from Kate Winslet here, who of course plays our title character and does it to perfection. What I really love about Winslet as an actress, and something I've always enjoyed about her, is that she's one of those actresses that really transforms into these roles. She's a true character actor in that way, and with someone like Mare Shin, I mean, this is a really hard role, I feel like, to portray, because you're playing this woman that has gone through so many different tragedies in her life, and you can see how much this has affected her, but yet she never expresses that emotion. She doesn't show emotion in the way that you expect her to. She's constantly repressed all of it, and you have to do that in such a way where you can see the impact it's left on Mare, but not do it too much to where it betrays the character. And Winslet strikes the perfect balance here. I mean, you really do see just how affected Mare has been through everything, even if she doesn't explicitly show it, even if she doesn't want to admit how much these, events in her life have really affected her. You really do feel it throughout this entire show. Her emotion is, there is a palpable sense of emotion. There is a palpable palpable sense of regrets and of regrets and grief throughout this entire show, and Winslet just does such a phenomenal job with that. Just seeing her react to things, you know, the way she's able to do that, I think she does a really great job with, but also seeing just how dedicated she is to solving this case and what that really does to her, the effect it has on her as a character is just really incredible to watch. And throughout the entire show, Winslet is just mesmerizing to watch as an actress. She's one of those actresses where, you know, the second she comes on screen, all eyes are on her, and she really does remind us why she is truly one of the best working today, and I think might have given her best performance yet within this show. It's a role that truly, I think very few actors would be able to pull it off, but not only did Winslet pull it off, she really made this character into something special and really honed her craft in a way I don't think we've seen her do yet, and so for me, it might just be the best performance that she's ever given. It's without a doubt the best performance I've seen all year. Just absolutely phenomenal work from her throughout. But here's the thing, as good as Winslet is, she is not the only talent in the show to really credit. I think really everyone does a fantastic job here. A performance that I think everyone's going to be talking about is Evan Peters, who plays the character of Detective Zabel. He, of course, is Mare's, partner that is assigned to work with her on this case, and his character is the complete opposite of her. He's someone that's a lot more expressive. He's very positive in that way, but he also has a lot of insecurities that he himself is dealing with, and I think Peters really embodied that role quite well. I think with Evan Peters, you know, a lot of the time you put him in something, he's kind of just playing himself, but I think here he does a really good job of making this character his own and really making him stick out, and I really like what Peters ended up doing. The chemistry between these two, I think, is really well done. The way that they really do develop this bond throughout the show, it's one of the things you immediately do end up latching onto, and I thought that he just did a really strong job here. Someone else, though, that really is someone that I don't think you're going to realize how great a performance she's giving until you see the show play out, is Julianne Nicholson, who plays Mare's best friend, Lori. I can't say too much about her performance, but it's a performance that is really strong throughout, but you don't realize how good it is until you reach the end of this show, and once you get to the end, holy shit, I mean, her performance almost becomes as strong as Mare's. There's a lot that this character is going through as well, but I can't really get into a lot of it, but she also was just absolutely phenomenal here. Her performance at times was just so gut-wrenching to watch, and I really loved what she ended up doing here. She was a huge consistent standout throughout the show for me. Angourie Rice is also really good as Mare's daughter, Siobhan, who is someone that she has a very contentious relationship with her mom, but you also understand why she feels that way, and I thought that she definitely gave a really strong performance here. I really liked Joe Tippit as well. I thought he gave a very strong performance as Lori's husband. I really enjoyed the work that he did. David Denman is really good here too. Everyone really does a fantastic job here. Jean Smart also, I mean, her role is one that I think is very much a big standout, because while everyone else is very much playing these, you know, very emotionally heavy characters, Smart is much more of the comedic relief in the show. That's not to say she hasn't gone through a lot herself, because she has, but they often will use her for, you know, comedic moments, and every single time they did, it really did work. I mean, she definitely is a big part of this series that I think keeps you invested. You know, whenever stuff is getting really heavy, you have her to really just remind you of why you enjoy the, you know, you have her to really just make things so you're still able to watch. And I thought she provided a sense of levity, but also a sense of hope that I think the show otherwise would not have had. And I really liked what she ended up doing here. Really just this entire cast, even some of the smaller roles within the show. Like, for example, For example, one that really sticks out to me is Patrick Murney, who plays this character Kenny. I really liked what he ended up doing in the show. Or Phyllis Somerville, who isn't in the show very long, but for what she has, I mean, she gives a really strong performance. Really, just this entire cast, everyone really does kill it. I don't think there is a single weak link without this entire within this entire ensemble. I think everyone really did just give their fullest potential in terms of performance. And I think that's definitely one of the best things about this show for sure. It's such a memorable ensemble of actors, all of which have at least one moment to really showcase just how great they are in these roles, and I really like what everyone ended up doing here. But now we really have to get into the directing and the writing within the show, because that is what really makes this show something special. Going into the show, I feel like some people are going to have an expectation for what this is really going to be. I've seen a lot of people compare this show to True Detective, saying that this maybe could have been like a fourth season of True Detective, and I don't really see that comparison. I understand that, yes, True Detective does center around a different murder. I've watched season 3. If you guys remember, I did a review of season 3. When that came out. I haven't seen the other 2 seasons in full, but I know it centers around a murder and things like that, but I think the show does enough to where it really does stick out on its own, because while there is a murder going on in the show, that's not really the focus of this. That's definitely something that is prominent, and it is something that keeps you riveted throughout, but what I found myself more drawn to is the fact that this really is a much more emotional and traumatic character study of a woman that has gone through a lot of, very hard moments within her life. There's a lot of things that she's grappling with, and she's really struggling to process grief. And I really think that's what this show is really all about. And I think the way that Brad Inglesby as a director was able to balance both this very riveting and constantly, edge of your seat, crime thriller with a much more personal and emotional character drama, I thought was really well done. One never undermines the other. It never felt like we were getting too much focus of one. And I thought overall he just did a really great job when it came to the directing here. You really get a sense of what he was going for in the show. I think, he's really trying to showcase this in the most realistic way possible, and I really enjoyed his directing here. I thought that he just really anchored this entire show in terms of the directing, and I really liked what he ended up doing here overall. I thought that his creating was very good, but in terms of directing, Craig Zabel is really the person that we have to credit here, and it's not surprising that he's able to balance stuff as well as he is. This is the guy that did direct some of the best episodes of The Leftovers. He's directed a few episodes before. He's directed an episode of Westworld, so he really does know what he's doing when it comes to directing this kind of stuff, and he really proves by directing every single episode of this show just how much of a talent he really is. He's truly one of the best directors, I think, working today when it comes to emotional sensibilities. I think he just does such a great job with that, and I was so impressed by his directing throughout the show. But let's get into the writing here, because that's the other thing that really makes the show something special. This is a very heavy and I think very it's a very dense drama, because obviously, yes, you do have this murder going on, and that murder is one that is very compelling when it comes to the murder of Eric McMenamin, but also this case of this missing girl, Katie Bailey, which is a case that Mare has failed to solve, and she's trying to simultaneously solve both of these at the same time. But like I said, what really draws you in is everything else that's going on throughout the show. There's a lot that Mare has been through. We find out very early on in the show, this is not a spoiler, you literally find out in the first episode, Mare has lost her son in the previous year due to a suicide, and this is something that it's, you know, she acts like she's not that affected by it. She acts like she's not, but everyone around her can tell, yeah, this is really having an effect on her. It's really impacting her in a pretty damning way, to the point where she will often get clouded by, you know, she will often use her work as a way to sort of repress those emotions. She never really wants to face it. She's always trying to keep it in the back of her mind and move on from it. And I think the way that the show portrays grief, it's gonna connect with many. And I think a lot of people are really gonna find themselves relating to Mare as a character. You know, the way that she goes about things. I mean, she doesn't have a lot of great relationships within her life. Her relationship with her daughter is one that holds a lot of resentment. Both of them harbor a lot of negative feelings towards each other. Not just because of what's happened, but also because of the way both of these characters treat each other. I mean, Mare has not really been a very good mother to Siobhan, and Siobhan really does not have a lot of love towards her mother. I mean, often these two are kind of just barely tolerating each other. It's really ugly to watch. So you can see that Mare is just not in a very good place within her life. On top of that, she also has this whole custody thing that she's dealing with from her her son's now widow that, you know, basically has been left with this child, and she's trying to tend to this child as much as she possibly can. But you can see that there's a lot of questions as to whether or not Mare being with her grandson is the best way to raise her grandson. So there really is a lot that she's dealing with throughout this entire show, and you can really see the weight that all of this is really having on her, and how she is trying so hard to try to just, you know, solve everything at once. She is trying to juggle everything, and you can see how much of a struggle that really is for her to do. And I think it makes the show that much more emotionally effective, you know, that much more impactful when you really just see how much she's really juggling with, but also how much the show is really juggling with, because there is a lot going on within this show, but I never felt like anything was, you know, that there was ever too much going on. This really is one of those shows where we get to see everyone's perspective when it comes to this case, especially our latest case when it comes to Aaron. I mean, there's a lot of different characters we're following throughout this, and some of that is so it can increase our suspicions with whether or not they were the perpetrators in, you know, Aaron's death, you know, if they were the ones responsible for it. But it also is to give us a bigger understanding of these characters. A character like, say, let's, you know, take, for example, the character of Father Dan Hastings. This is a character that is a priest, and, you know, we can see right off the bat that there's a lot about him that we feel very uneasy about, but we also are very intrigued by his character. We want to know more about him, and we sort of see what he also is struggling with. Similar to Mare, he also is trying hard to, like, redeem his reputation and things like that. And so I really liked what they ended up doing with that character a lot. Or say the character of Dylan, who is Aaron's boyfriend, you know, this is Aaron's ex-boyfriend. He also is going through a lot in this show. You think for a while that he's gonna go in this direction of just being this, like, abusive ex, but there's a lot more to him than that. And that's something I really enjoy when it comes to this show, is that for every plot beat you think you know where it's going to go, it decides to go somewhere else. And it's not just like subduing your expectations, it's trying to tell a better story. And I think they do a really great job with that. Colin Zabel was another character that I thought was going to go in a really different direction. The second these two meet, they really can't stand each other. You know, Mare literally wants to be partnered with anyone else. These two have zero chemistry, but as the show goes on, you start to see there's a lot of similarities between these two, more than you really would expect. And I think it just enriched a lot of the characterization. It heightened a lot of the it definitely heightened my interest when it came to the story, and it kept me that much more invested in what was going to go on. This is one of the most unpredictable shows that I have seen in a very long time. I can't really think of anything that happened in the show that I was like, oh yeah, that's what I expected. Really, nothing that happened here went in the direction that I thought it would, and I think the show is that much better because of it. I love that this show tried to do something different. It's trying so hard to tell a different kind of story than you really would expect it to, and I think the show is that much better because of it. But again, I really do want to reiterate, the mystery part of the show as well is still one that is very compelling. You don't know a lot of what's going on. You want to know more about this, but you also see how invested Mare is in this case and what it really would mean to her to actually solve this. But you also start to wonder, is this case solvable? Is this one that is actually going to end in a concrete manner? Is there an answer to what happened? Or is this just something that she can't solve? And so, again, there's a lot of different factors towards this case. There's a lot riding on it. And so, not only are you so on the edge of your seat, hoping to find some kind of answer, hoping to dig for anything that you can latch onto, similar to how Mare is trying to kind of like latch onto anything to have some kind of foreseeable conclusion here. But you also are really invested in the personal stuff that Mare is going through, and I think the show does a really strong job with that. So just overall, a really brilliant writing. I really loved what this show ended up doing, and again, the various directions that it ended up taking, was just so shocking to me, especially a certain moment that goes down in the 5th episode of this show. I was so speechless that they went in the direction that they did, but it made the show that much better because, again, it showed it was a show that was never going to go in a conventional direction. It always was going to find a way to do something drastically different than what you would expect, and it would often make the show better as a result, and I think they did a really great job with that overall. And when it comes to the mystery, forget about it. This show is just so relentless when it comes to certain answers. There's one scene in episode 5 especially. I have not been that anxious and that suspense, and that scared of what was going to happen in a show in quite a bit. And the way they're able to just ramp up the tension constantly, I think they just did such a strong job with it, and I really liked where the show ended up going overall. And right when you think you know finally where the show is going, the ending happens. And without spoiling anything, the actual resolution to the show, when we actually find out what happened to Aaron, the impact that it has on everyone, it gives the show a whole new meaning that made me respect it that much more and made me that much more satisfied that I stuck with the show when I did, that it actually went in this direction. It really swings for the fences, and it's one of those twists that could upset a lot of people, but I think because of how much this show gives you the impression that this is more than just a mystery. There's a lot more layers to it than that. I think the ending's going to be that much more satisfying to people overall. I think the ending is actually one of the best parts of this show because it tries to do something that was a lot more personal than I think you'd expect when it comes to this show. But if you have been keeping track of this show, I don't think it's as shocking that it would go in the direction that it did because it made that much more sense for them to go in the unpredictable direction that it really ended up. So I really like what they end up doing. There's so many intricate details as well when it came to the show, whether it's just seeing parts of certain characters' lives, whether it's seeing certain parallels to characters, like the way that Mare parents Siobhan versus the way that Mare's own mom parents her. You see a lot of similarities there, but you also see a lot of differences as well, and you kind of get to see what led them to this point, and I really liked getting to see that overall. I thought stuff like that was really brilliantly written, but there's other side stories going on within the background that I found to be just as investing as the main one here, because again, everyone is really just just doing what they can to really get those answers, really do what they, because everyone is blaming themselves for what happened. A lot of people are going in certain directions. This is a town that doesn't have a lot happen usually. This murder, Aaron's murder, is something that really just shakes up the entire town. You know, normally the worst thing that's happened is like this peeping Tom case that we hear about early on, but you see how things continue to escalate throughout this town and what it really drives a lot of these characters to do. I think they did a really great job with that. So again, I think the writing here is just absolutely spectacular. There's so many things to really love about it, but the cinematography in this show, I mean, it's just so visceral in that way. It really makes you feel like you're in this town of Pennsylvania, that you're right there, that you're there in Philadelphia with these characters. There's so many shots here that I think are just so memorable to watch, and I think they do a really great job in terms of the cinematography. It's very visceral, but it also places you in that, but it also really plays into a lot of the themes and ideas within the show. There's nothing that the show will show you that isn't intentional. There's nothing that they decide to show to the viewer that isn't intentional. And I think that's something that I really appreciate about the show. That's what the best television shows do, is that it gives you this imagery that at the time you're like, what's that about? And eventually it all ties together. And this is one of those shows that really does a great job with that. There's a lot of like, you know, motifs and things like that we keep coming back to, and I think they did a really great job when it came to the cinematography here. The score to this show as well is one that really resonated with me. It heightened the tension, it heightened the emotional heft of what the show was really going for, and I think they did a really great job with that. And the editing. The show only has 7 episodes, but I think it was definitely the right amount. There's, you know, a lot of these episodes, they range from like 50 minutes to sometimes over an hour. The last episode is obviously the longest one. It's over an hour. It's like 70 something minutes, I think. But they do not waste a second of their time when it comes to this show. I don't think there was anything that felt like, oh, that dragged on too much or that wasn't given enough. I think everything was really paced perfectly when it came to the show. The first episode, you really don't get a sense of what the show is going to be at first. It's kind of just setting everything up, throwing you into this world, showing you what Mare has been through, and then it really brings up the main plot line of this show. And I thought that was a really brilliant choice because it really got us to invest in these characters. And Erin specifically, the show spends a lot of time on her in that first episode, and you don't really know why, and you get so invested that when her eventual murder happens, you know, you're that much more locked into it. You're that much more devastated. And I thought that was a really smart choice because it really didn't feel like we're just watching the death of a character. It felt like you're watching someone that you know personally, that you've seen in your town, someone that was very, that wasn't necessarily respected, but someone that everyone knew. And just hearing what happened, you know, it really hits you in that way. And I think they did a really, really strong job with that. So I really enjoyed the editing within this show. Alright, so now I really want to get into spoilers for Mare of Easttown, which, holy shit, is there a lot to talk about. I mean, if you thought my spoiler section for the Underground Railroad was pretty long, there's a lot to really discuss in this show. There's a lot that goes down in terms of spoilers. First thing I really want to talk about, which doesn't seem like a big deal, Guy Pearce's character. Did not bring him up at all initially. I completely neglected to speak on his character in the non-spoiler section, and the reason for that is because the entire show, I thought for sure, like, this guy was going to be the killer. I mean, you watch his character, and he's this nice guy, and he's someone that is generally very kind to Mare. He's one of the only people that generally, you know, seem to give her a sense of escapism. He is trying to, you know, they're just going on dates. He's, you know, wants to be like a good boyfriend. Or you think at first it's just going to be a one-night stand, but then they keep seeing each other. And I really thought throughout the show this was hinting at him being the killer and that he was deceiving her, that he was a reporter, that he was trying to gain intel on her or something. Turns out, no, he's just a nice guy. he really is just a nice guy, and I really like that a lot. I like the idea that they were actually trying to deceive you with this character. This character, you think throughout a lot of the show, is just a giant red herring. You think that's what he is, but I like that at the end of the day, that's actually not what they were trying to do with him. He actually is presenting the idea of Mare finally moving on, her kind of beginning the next chapter of her life, so to speak, because finally with Richard Ryan, she can have something that is good in her life. She can have something that is healthy in her life. Here is a nice guy that generally wants to, be good to her, generally wants to get to know her better. And I think that's what Richard Ryan really represents as a character. And so I that's something I really enjoyed throughout the show, because my parents would watch this show a lot. And so I'd have conversations with my mom frequently about the show. And I kept saying, oh, it's got to be Guy Pearce. It's got to be Guy Pearce. I was so on the Guy Pearce is the killer train that when he wasn't, I actually was that much more impressed that wasn't the case, that instead he was actually just a really nice guy. Because, and I don't know if that was intentional, like I don't think they intentionally casted Guy Pearce as like a red herring, but I think the idea that this is a guy that is, bringing positivity to Mare's life, which has been pretty devoid of positive figures, I think is a really good thing, and it really helps bring about the main theme of this show, which I'll get into in a little bit. But before we do, I want to talk about a pretty big spoiler. Let's talk about Colin Zabel, because this was a character that went in directions that I really would not have expected him to. The show starts off, and these two, they can't stand each other. He's a very, he's someone that is, the opposite of Mare. Mare's someone that is very stubborn. She's very tough, but she also will constantly turn people away. And a lot of people are just very alienated by her because of the way that she acts. Whereas Colin is the complete opposite. I mean, this is a guy that is so approachable. Everyone likes him. Everyone wants to talk to him. You can see that even him and, Mare's daughter are clicking a bit. She wants to know more about their investigation. Everyone really seems to like this guy, and that's something I really do like about Zabel as a character. But what really drew me to him is that he actually does have a lot of similarities to Mare. He also has recently gotten out of a relationship, and it was kind of ugly, and you can see that things aren't great for him, and he still lives with his mom, but he also is starting to develop feelings for Mare. And the second that happened, I knew something wasn't going to work out. Whether it was the fact that Mare didn't like him in that way, or they weren't, or she wasn't ready for a relationship, I knew something was just not going to work out when it came to Zabel. I didn't for a second think that he was the killer. That would have been really fucking stupid and way too predictable. So I'm really glad they did not go in that direction. Instead, they do something with him that I would have never really expected. Zabel dies, in the 5th episode of this show, and he's not even in the last 2, and I was so shocked that they actually killed him. I was like, no, there's no possible way that that's what they were doing, but when you really think about it, it makes sense for this character to go out that way, because what is the last thing his mom says to him, before he goes on this, when he finally, goes on this stakeout and goes after the guy that kidnapped Katie Bailey? She says, be careful, something that he never was in his life. The one time that he actually is careful is when he ends up dying. He very easily should have, shot at the guy. He very easily, he was toying with using his gun and he didn't. And I think that was really interesting, and I think what that's really saying about Zabel as a character is that as a detective, he was really good, but he was someone that wasn't careful, that was too careful with what he was doing. It was neat, it was clean, and I think that's a lot of what this show is trying to do, the idea that things can't be done in a neat and tidy way. It's going to be messy. It's going to be brutal. And I think that's ultimately what did kill Zabel. He wanted to end things in a neat and tidy manner. And that's something that we saw throughout this show. Like, there were constantly things that Mare wanted to do that he didn't really want to do because he didn't think that it was, the right time to do it. He didn't think they should be getting so involved in this case. Meanwhile, Mare is, and we can see why that ultimately did kill Zabel. And I don't think Zabel is at fault for that or anything, but I think it was a really interesting and very poignant thing to kill off this character, because not only, again, does it represent the idea that Mare and Zabel had very different methods when it came to solving this case, but it's yet another thing on Mare's shoulders. I mean, the way that Zabel's mom reacts to this, the resentment that she has for Mare, I mean, I don't think that is a relationship that is ever going to be solved. I don't think there is an avenue where Zabel's mom can forgive Mare. She will always blame Mare for this, because remember, Zabel didn't want to be involved in this case. Mare was off the case at this point, but she pulled herself back in, and by proxy, he was also pulled into it. And because of that, it's what led to his death. And I really like the idea. This is yet another thing that's on Mare's shoulders. And between this, her son's death, her poor parenting with Brianna, the custody battle with Drew, there's so many things that Mare is juggling within this show, and you're just kind of waiting for her to crack at that point. And then, when you get to that episode, the penultimate episode, you think you finally found the killer at that point. You think you finally figured out who it is. We see this character, Billy, who of course is John's brother, aka Laurie's husband's brother, and he confesses to killing. And it seems like a pretty accurate confession. It seemed like this was pretty concrete. It seemed like this was all the information that they needed, and it seems like that's what was exactly going on. It didn't really seem like there was much else to this overall. He confesses to the murder, goes off to jail. It turns out, John also is in jail because he knew about it and covered it up, and he kind of tells this story about what happened to him. And, you think that that's what happened, that it's just, Billy did it. Billy is arrested for what happened. But John does not react to this very lightly. He almost kills Billy, and you see Mare comes in, subdues him. And from that moment, I'm like, no, there's got to be more to this. This feels too neat. It does. It feels too neat. It feels like they're just wrapping things up in a nice little bow. There's no possible way that that's all there is to this. There's no possible way that that's the ending that we're really going with. And then you realize what's actually going on. Something the show, I think, did brilliantly that I kind of mentioned in my non-spoiler review, but now I'm going to speak on much more candidly, is the fact that throughout this entire show, when you have this murder going on with Aaron, but you also have all the drama with Mare, there's a little side story going on with Laurie. And we know throughout the show, Laurie is going through something. There's clearly a lot of tension in her and John's relationship. It seems like these two are on the verge of divorce, and it's really affecting their son. And at the time, I didn't really know what to make of this. I remember it came up in one episode where Ryan got into a fight at school, and they really were focusing heavily on this, and we didn't really know what to make of it overall. But we also know there's something brewing in the sense of Aaron's child's father. In the first episode, we think it's Dylan. It was their relationship, but we realized very quickly that it's not Dylan. Aaron's friend Jess, comes to the realization that she had an affair with someone else, at first thinking that it's, Mare's ex-husband's, Frank Shin, and that it was him that did it. I like that ultimately that wasn't the case. I think it would have been an interesting direction if they did that with Frank, but what they did instead was so much more profound and so much more effective in that way. And I really liked where they ended up going with with this twist overall, what actually ends up happening that caused the death of Eric McMenamin. Now, we find out in this episode that John was actually the one that was in an affair with Erin. These two had a very specific relationship. They were very engaged in it. It was something where, she was okay with it. He wanted to constantly, he wanted to break things off, but they were in this relationship, and, he's the one that fathered her child, and Erin had actually called him away from, Frank's engagement party because she wanted to meet him in the park, and basically she had threatened to commit suicide and things like that, and basically he had shot her while struggling for the gun at that point, and basically Billy moved her body to the woods. And so you think, okay, John's the killer, that's it, case closed. But again, something just doesn't feel right, because this confession happens and there's 30 minutes left of the episode. You're like, well, what the fuck happens now? And for a while, it just feels like, there's a bit of a calm. Mare can finally breathe at this point. We see the engagement party happens with Frank. Everything seems fine. With him, they're finally in a moment of peace overall. Deacon Mark is released. A lot of people thought that Deacon Mark was responsible because he had a very close relationship with Erin, but there wasn't much to that. And the details of that, I will say, if they were to ever do a season 2 of the show, which I don't think they should do, I really don't, I think that's the main thing they would focus on, is Deacon Mark and how he kind of moves on from this, because he's kind of in a similar spot to Mare now, where his reputation really does need to be redeemed. But does he care more about his reputation, or does he care more about what he did with Erin? Because there's still a lot of things that we don't know. We don't know how close their relationship really was. We just know that he clearly had some sort of a relationship with her, and I definitely want to find out more about that. We see Carrie is back on drugs, and she drops the custody case entirely and actually checks herself into rehab, which allows Drew to stay with Mare after all this time. And so again, it feels like everything is slowly wrapping up. You have her and Richard Ryan and them kind of starting out a legitimate relationship. It seems like they're actually gonna go somewhere. But then she gets a call, and who's it from? Glenn Carroll, of course, the husband of Betty Carroll, who we find out, we find out in I believe the 5th or 4th episode that she ended up in some kind of car accident, had some kind of heart attack at the wheel, which was crazy. But he calls Mare in and basically admits to her that there's one damning piece of evidence that he failed to leave out, that basically, he was on this shooting range, and the only person, but he, found out that there was 2 rounds missing in his gun. And the only person responsible to that, it turns out, was Laurie's son, Ryan. That's right. We find out in this moment that not John, not Billy, Ryan is the one that killed Erin. And the reason he did it, I think, is really interesting, because it turns out that all of this was done accidentally. Ryan never meant to kill Erin. He confronted her because of the fact that he wanted her to stay away from his family. He didn't like the relationship that was going on between her and John. And look, John is 100% at fault for this, for sure. He knew what he was doing. He knew exactly what he was engaging in, even though Erin was initiating it. I mean, it was still gross what was happening, and he is definitely the one that we should blame for should blame for this for sure. And it turns out basically Ryan was the one that met Erin at the park. It wasn't John that met her. Basically, he wanted to use Glenn's gun just to scare her away. That's all he wanted to do. He used the gun as a method to scare her away, but she freaked out. Basically, there was this physical struggle. He ended up killing her, and ever since then, John and Billy covered it up to protect him. And it's this huge moment, because you realize, while Mare has been investigating this case this whole time, Laurie has been covering this entire thing up, and now all of the pieces are clicking together. This is why there was so much tension between Laurie and John, because Laurie knew about the affair, but she also knew what Ryan had done, and she was doing everything she could to, you know, make sure that her son was not guilty for this. She was covering this up as much as she possibly could. Meanwhile, she was also clearly and obviously very angry at her husband, the fact that he had this affair and kept it from her. I mean, you can see what this has really done to her overall, but it really just changes, I think, the entire fabric of the show, because you realize this was never a show about a murder mystery. This was never just a character study. This is a show about grief and the different ways that you process it, both physical and in some ways mental grief in that way. I mean, every single one of these characters, Laurie and Mare especially, they have something in common now. They have this bond that is, you know, one that I think will always bring them together, in that they both have completely lost their sons. Obviously, Mare literally lost her son because he died. But Laurie also has too, because Ryan's entire life now is fucked. He's in a juvenile detention center. Her entire family, you know, her husband's in prison. Her entire family life is pretty much in shambles at this point. And I love the moment. It might be my favorite scene of the entire show, where basically Laurie is chastising Mare and telling her that this was the one thing that she should have just not spent time on. This was the one thing that she needed to just let go. She had already, you know, she had already, arrested John, the person that really is the real perpetrator of all this, because he's the one who initiated the affair with Aaron. If he doesn't do that, none of this ever happens. So Laurie really feels like, you know, she should have just let it go at that point. And I like the fact that she really lashes out at Mare, because I think Mare really needed to hear this. I mean, yeah, throughout the entire show, people are trying to get Mare less involved with this case. They're saying, like, you know, you don't understand what this is doing to you. This is having a really bad effect on you overall. You know, you have, like, say, Chief Carter. He's constantly trying to get her off the case, but then she keeps pulling herself back in. And I think we realize now why she was really doing that. She was doing it as a way to sort of get closure. She wanted to wrap something up, and now it's affecting really her only real friendship. I mean, when Mare was going through a really rough time, you know, Laurie was there for her. Laurie was the one comforting her throughout everything. When she thought that maybe Frank was the father of Aaron's child, Laurie was the one trying to sort of comfort her through all of that. And now Mare has to be there for Laurie, and I love the moment where she does finally decide to be there for her, even after Laurie has basically told her, just get the fuck out of my life. I don't want to see you anymore. I like the fact that Mare takes that initiative and decides to comfort Laurie. It shows that there is a real friendship there, but again, they now have a commonality that they didn't before. They both have lost their sons, and there isn't much they can do about it. And I like that this is the thing that finally gets Mare to confront her son's death. It finally gets her to come to that realization that she needs to do something, that she can't just let this go. She can't just repress this. She needs to confront this head on. And when she finally heads into that attic, it is just such a satisfying moment. And I know there are people saying, oh, we got to get a season 2. There's more that they can do in this show. But I mean it when I say I don't think there is a better ending for this show than Mare going up to that attic and basically deciding to, you know, finally come to terms with what happened, finally get that closure that she's wanted, you know, this entire time. She has been avoiding it, but you know that she's always wanted it. You know this is something that has been troubling her. Her going to therapy, you know, on a more regular basis. I like the fact that she's doing that now, and I like what the therapist tells her in that scene, you know, where she basically tells her, like, you need to finally do the thing that you've been running from. You need to finally heal from everything. And I think if there was a season 2 of the show, that's what it would really be about, would be her healing from everything that's happened. But I feel like that's implied. It's implied that Mare is finally going to heal from this, that Mare is finally going to be in a better place now, because she isn't hiding from it anymore. She's accepting the fact that her son died. She's accepting the fact that he killed himself. And yeah, maybe she feels guilt over it. Maybe she is sort of responsible for some of what happened because she wasn't the best mother to him. But it happened, and there's nothing that she can do about it. And in the same way where Lori now has to face the reality that Ryan's in juvie. You know, he's not gonna leave anytime soon. Even though Mare is saying that, you know, he'll be okay, who knows how long he's actually going to be there? Who knows how much longer this is going to last? But they're just going to have to face reality. They can't run from it anymore. And I think that is just such a profound ending. And it's one that is going to touch so many people. I'm sure we've all had something in our life that we want to repress. You know, we want to act like that doesn't exist. That's not something that we need to face. And this doesn't just apply to Mare and Lori. It also applies to Carrie. The fact that Carrie was running away from the fact that she is addicted to heroin. She was running away from that because she wanted to be a mother to Drew. But she as well needed to you know, leave her son for the betterment of him, for the betterment of herself. You know, she loves her son. Obviously, she wants to be a mother to her son, but the only way she's going to be able to feel better about herself is if she faces the fact that she is a drug addict, and there really is no you know, there really is no hiding from that anymore. I think it's just such a great moment, and it applies to so many various characters within the show. It wraps things up in such a satisfying manner, and I really just love the way everything did come together within this. I think it recontextualized a lot of what the show was really setting up, but it gave the show a deeper meaning that made me appreciate it that much more. This was already a very emotional and very resonant show, a very emotionally resonant show, and one that really did touch my heart, one that drew so many emotions out of me. But knowing what it actually is about, knowing what it was actually setting up, it makes the show feel that much more special, and I think it's going to leave a much bigger impact. And the fact that they were able to pull it off so well and constantly go in these different directions, but really just enrich the show and make it that much better overall, I think is highly commendable, and it's a huge reason as to why I love the show as much as I do. And like I said, I can see a scenario in which they did a season 2, but with the way things end, as perfect as it is, I just don't see the need for it. I just don't see a reason to continue to this point, because the whole show was about Mare gaining closure, and she's finally gaining that closure. I don't really see a reason to continue from here. I think this is one of the limited series that should stay as such, and I really do mean that. I know I've said that with other shows like Big Little Lies, but I really do mean it when I say I think this show needs to stay as a limited series. I don't think it would be nearly as good, and I do think you would lose the impact if it went past this season overall. So overall, guys, Mare of Easttown is an absolutely enthralling series. It is riveting, it's emotional, it's even funny at points, and it takes what you think is going to be a very typical murder mystery and really turns it on its head, turning it into a much more dense and emotional look at grief, a much more emotional look at this woman, this broken woman, and all of these different things that are troubling her throughout her life, and how she's really going to find a way to get out of it. It's a brilliant character study. It's got some of the best performances of the entire year. Kate Winslet gives maybe the best performance of her entire career in the show. Her performance is one that is truly a powerhouse, one that I think it's worth watching alone just to see how good she is. Julianne Nicholson and Evan Peters as well. They really do carry this entire show. The mystery is constantly It is constantly enriching. It's one that I do think has a very compelling mystery, but I think what's really going to draw you to it are its characters and the hardships that they have to overcome and how much the show really does care about what it's doing. And when you eventually get to that point of what the show is really all about, I think it takes on a whole new meaning and will give you a deeper appreciation for this show overall. It really does turn things on its head in a brilliant way. Mare of Easttown is truly one of the best things I have seen in a very long time. It is without a doubt the best HBO show in a long time, and it is, for me, I think the best show of the entire year. And so for all of those reasons and more, I am absolutely giving Mare of Easttown an A+. Seriously, guys, I know a lot of people have been talking about this show, and I'm sorry that it took me so long to get this review out, but this show really is something special, and it is one that you need to watch immediately. I know there's a lot of, like, crime procedurals out there, but this really is a cut above the rest, I think, and I'm very happy that it's already getting a lot of, like, Emmy nominations and things like that, because it really does deserve that love, and it is so great to enamor over an HBO show again. It's been a while since I've been able to do that, but I really loved everything about this show, and I'm also very happy that it's a show that was able to gain such a big audience, because I really do think it deserves it. But other than that, guys, in my review of Mare of Easttown, let me know what you guys saw this show overall, left your thoughts, and we'll see you guys in my next video, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.